All right, cool. All right. Welcome to the podcast Gnosis, where we learn how we know what we know. And, Gnosis means together knowing. Uh, Today's guest is a patent attorney, a friend that I met on Clubhouse, and strangely enough, used to file the patents for my grandfather's company and help me find two patents on Google Patent that he had filed with the patent office. So, Carlos, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and what you're about?
Yeah, I'm a electrical engineer and I'm a patent attorney, a veteran, and an entrepreneur. So I wear a lot of hats. But most recently, I'm a patent attorney for the past couple of decades. But I was in engineering for about a decade or so, working for various defense contractors, and then went to the dark side, as they say, patent law. So.
Cool.
Or the law in general is considered, quote, the dark side by most people.
Well, while I don't agree that the law is the dark side, it's definitely a conundrum wrapped in an enigma, built on a house of cards and only understood through argument. So, I am super curious. You're an inventor as well as an engineer, veteran, patent attorney, multi-hyphenate. Tell me a little bit about what you bring to the table of greenhouses. Like, what is your patent about?
Yeah, and that's a good question because I'm not a biologist or a mycologist, but I am growing fish plants and mushrooms. And basically, it was just a project. As an engineer, I like to learn outside of my wheelhouse, which is electronics, electrical engineering.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to take on projects that sort of teach me something that I don't know. And even though I've taken biology, I had never really, never really done any farming or gardening or anything like that. So I was on Facebook and I saw a little infographic about aquaponics, which is where the fish poop in the water, which increases nitrates. That nitrate water is pumped to the plants and then drained back into the fish pond, and you get this closed loop system where the fish feed the plants and the plants clean the water for the fish. And I saw a little infographic and I was looking for a project, and I said, how cool, I can build something in my backyard to grow fish and plants, which I've never done before. So I'm very decisive. So first thing I do is I research, uh, OCD type research. I think I read everything I could on aquaponics, like over like a month period or so, like nonstop, literally. And then once I've learned everything I possibly can, I go into the building phase. So it took me a few months to sort of digest aquaponics and then go into the build. And I decided to, being an engineer, we don't do things the way they've been done a million times because, maybe there's a better way or maybe even just a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to go with a fully air-powered system, which went against conventional aquaponic thinking at the time. And I think I saw the clip or the infographic, and I think it was like December or something like that of 2012. By March of 2013, I was already building my system, and I put it in my backyard. I used an old jacuzzi, and then I bought everything I had the jacuzzi. I recycled it. It was one of these. It's called spa in a box. It's literally like a cover with a motor and this octagonal shaped thing that you build. You fill it with water, and you've got a spa in your backyard. It holds about 1,000 liters, 300 gallons. So I had a spare one of those, and I said, hey, that looks like a fish tank. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the fish tank. And then for the grow beds, I just used some totes that I had bought at Home Depot. I use classical hydroponic grow media. They're called expanded clay. And then I did, a conventional sort of design with a bell siphon. A bell siphon is something that drains the bed once it's flooded.
Mm-hmm.
But for pumping, I use what's called geyser pumps instead of water pumps. And basically, a geyser pump is something that's used in waste management. It has no moving parts. It's basically a big tube with a little tube inside of it, inside of the water, the
Mm-hmm.
fish pond, and with a little air hose connected to the big tube. So what happens is as you pump air into the big tube, the air displaces the water and pushes it out the little tube into the grow bed. And then the grow bed fills up, and then the bell siphon siphons it back out. And the reason I went with air power was because I wanted to maximize the dissolved oxygen in the pond.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted every grow bed to be modular. In conventional aquaponics, you have one water pump that floods all the beds and they drain all at once. They flood and they drain. The problem is that you're taking a huge chunk of water out of your pond, which stresses out the fish, which means now you have to have something called a sump tank to make up for that water that's being displaced. But since I ran each one of my modules as its own little module running off of its own geyser pump with its own power supply, I was able to not need a sump. And also, I was able to maximize dissolved oxygen in the pond because every grow bed has its own air pump. So the pond is constantly being aerated. So I never have had any trouble with fish dying because of lack of oxygen. I can let algae grow because I don't care. There's so much dissolved oxygen in the water. In systems where you don't have that, you have to like shade the pond. You have to take steps to keep algae from growing. In my system, since I'm pushing so much air into the water, I can give a shit. I'll grow algae, I'll grow whatever wants to grow in there. And the fish are always happy because the dissolved oxygen is maxed out. The downside is it's not as energy efficient as using a single water pump. So I traded off energy efficiency for redundancy.
Mm.
Since each one of my grow beds is running off of its own water pump with its own geyser pump, the chances of all the air pumps dying at once as n goes to infinity goes to zero. So just with 6 grow beds, the chances of all 6 pumps going out is like probably, I don't know, 0.1% or something crazy like that. So now I'm able to, if a grow bed goes down, I've got a spare pump. I just swap it out and I'm operational. And also, since each grow bed is modularized, now I can also run each grow bed off of its own solar panel, its own battery, and even extend the redundancy even further. What are the chances that all solar panels go out at once? All air pumps. And that was the idea, was I was trying to build something that could live off grid,
Mm-hmm.
very robust manner, something that you wouldn't have to worry about. Oh, your water pump went out, all your fish are dead, or the pond doesn't have enough air because your air pump went out. So it's got a lot of redundancies built in. And of course, I traded off energy use for redundancy in this situation.
Can you run it off of solar?
Right now I'm on grid, but the idea is to to run it off of solar and wind. Since the system runs from air,
Mm-hmm.
I can do a very simple wind turbine to air pump without any loss of when you go from wind to solar, or when you transform energy, you lose efficiency. So, if you've got a wind turbine that's already turning a gear or whatever, that's a mechanical action, right?
Right.
Now you have to turn a generator, which now generates electricity. Well, you lose efficiency in that every time you transform from mechanical, in this case, mechanical to electrical, you're losing some efficiency. However, you can go straight from mechanical to pumping air without losing that efficiency. of going to electricity first. And this is well known. I think farmers were aerating ponds with windmills like for hundreds of years.
Right.
Basically, it spins, moves a pump, mechanical action, and that pump compresses air that now generates air pressure for a pond or for something like that. So yeah, so the system is designed to run off of air and or solar. And also another interesting thing that I figured out was, since it does run from air, I can actually use air storage as a battery. In
Mm.
other words, I could, use these air pumps, whether they're running from solar or from wind turbines, whatever, to compress air and store it in large volumes. Of course, you need pretty large containers, but theoretically, you could have an air battery. The system could run off of a battery that's basically just compressed air from either solar panels or from wind turbines.
Mm. Um, so something you mentioned that you thought the system would work well in space. What makes you think it would work well in the outer space?
Well, I wasn't really, I mean, what I did a recent patent application that I just filed. And I was thinking more of, not so much how to build it in space yet, because that's a whole another design, with gravity and everything like that. But the latest version I filed is, if you could imagine glass globes,
Mm-hmm.
one filled with fish in the water. Another one is going to be plants with some sort of separator that separates the soil from the plant. Again, something that could rotate in space, with with gravity, without gravity. And
Right.
then also same
Centrifugal
thing.
force.
Yeah, same thing with, I was even thinking, even just without any artificial gravity, just like this thing is floating in 0 Gs, right? And
Mm-hmm.
each bubble is connected to each other with like things that can move gas,
Mm-hmm.
uh, CO2 and O2, and then things that can move water for taking the water from the fish to the plants, and from the plants back to the fish, from the fish to the mushrooms and back to the fish. Some nozzles for capturing the CO2 from the mushrooms and the fish and feeding them to the plants, something to capture the O2 from the plant chamber and feed it back to the fish and the mushrooms. And
Right.
then finally, there would be some sort of mechanical mechanisms to insert food into the globe that has the fish in it, because you have to feed them. So the patent calls for, some mechanical screw type devices that would push food into the water container with the fish. Of course, it's a patent, so the actual design is going to have a lot more engineering. Like, for example, how do you seal off the water while you're, pushing the food into, but these things are solvable, right? Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
airlocks. So, you probably have some sort of airlock. The food goes in there, the airlock opens, and it floods with water, and now the fish are eating. Now
Mm-hmm.
the fish are pooping, right? We need to get that over to the plant globe, and there's going to be some liquid pumping mechanisms that now are going to transfer the poopy water to the plant, and then the clean water back. So sort of a bidirectional, and it's high level, because obviously actually building it for space would be a whole, in the actual design of something, you could actually take this concept and build it. You're going to solve 1,000 problems, which means another 1,000 patents related to each little problem, like
Right.
the interlock mechanism, the feeding mechanism, the gas exchange mechanism. I drew it up at a high level. It's something that can conceptually work, but of course, getting it to actually work is a whole nother engineering design effort. But the idea was that you could place these underwater or in space,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to conduct experiments in zero weight, in areas that don't have a lot of gravity, to see how do the mushrooms function, how do the fish function. I'm sure the fish will be fine because they're already in 0 G pretty much, being in the water. Frankly, I don't think anything's going to have a problem with it. I think the hardest part from an engineering point of view would be the separators that separates like the mushroom mycelium from the mushrooms, the plants from,
Mm-hmm.
from substrate, and the way to exchange the water, seems a little tricky. But for the patent, it's good enough to come up with a high level concept. And I don't know if anybody else has thought of, interchanging this sort of fish plants and mushrooms, which is sort of my gig, is the incorporation of fish, plants, and mushrooms.
Right. Is there a particular species of mushroom that you're interested in?
Mushrooms are mushrooms. They require different substrates and different fruiting conditions. And that leads to a whole nother set of requirements for this machine. You'd have to have some way of controlling heat and temperature, right? It's cold,
Mm-hmm.
pretty cold in space, I think. So I suspect you're going to have some sort of heating and cooling added. But again, I just want to get the idea out there so that I can have, a mark in the sand that says, this is when Carlos Villamar thought about, fish plants and mushrooms in space. And of course, once you start talking about actual buildings and things like that, we're at another level, right?
Right.
Now I'm going to need space construction engineers to tell me how the hell you build something in space, and how you handle gravity and everything like that.
So that's interesting. You're filing a patent where you don't really know how it's technically going to work, but um, you're saying that you invented something even though it doesn't exist in a physical way.
It puzzles a lot of people, because I teach people how to think like an inventor, not an engineer.
Right.
See, as an engineer, I never would have even filed that. I'm like, I can't touch it, hold it, feel it this second. And for an engineer, you want to be able to touch, hold, and feel things. We're men of action, right?
Right.
We build shit. It's got to work, and we touch it, hold it, feel it. So, theory for engineers are worthless. Like to me, a theory is like, oh, great. Well, how do you apply the theory? That's
Mm-hmm.
to me, that's a more interesting question as an engineer. But if I were thinking like an engineer, I never would have filed patents, because engineers, only want to do stuff that they can do right now. To give you an example, you can put GPS transceivers in golf balls right now.
Right.
I got one in my watch, right? Which means you could put it in a golf ball. Well, 20 years ago, you couldn't do that, or 10, 15 years ago, you couldn't do that. However, one of my partners got a patent on exactly that concept, putting a GPS transceiver in a golf ball.
So you can locate it.
Because patents last 20 years, see? So as an inventor, this is how I teach inventing. You have access to all the technology that's available right now, and all the technology that will be developed over the next 20 years. So even though when my colleague filed that patent on a golf ball finder using a GPS transceiver, GPS transceivers were the size of a softball, right? So you can't put a softball inside of a golf ball. However, he was thinking like an inventor, not an engineer would say, I'm not taking this project. GPSs are the size of golf, softballs, and you're trying to put it in. It's not going to work. Next project. Whereas as an inventor, you say, I think GPSs are going to shrink down to the size of golf balls within the next 20 years. So you get to think on a much broader scale, right? Like I've got designs in my patents that are buildable, but probably won't be built for another 10 years. Like I got a geodesic design where every single triangle is a solar panel glass that can be transparent or see-through. Now, this technology exists, right? I mean, there's university research people doing stuff with, glass that can be reflective or transmissive, and glass that can be solar panel and also see-through. So these are all things that exist. However, I can't buy these triangular panels for my geodesic design, it doesn't mean that it can't be done, right?
Right.
So the idea for this geodesic design is every single triangle has a stepper motor on it so it can rotate.
Hmm.
And every single triangle, besides being this glass that can be reflective, transmit, etc., has a temperature, has sensors on it, temperature, humidity, wind, motion, all the sensors that you possibly put on it. So now you have a building that can track the sun, that can ventilate itself
Mm-hmm.
just by opening and closing and turning these panels on and off. And it can also generate electricity for the building, just from that structure. So that alone would be an incredible engineering feat to have that particular. I would love to have that geodesic structure, and it would work, because
Right.
everything I'm talking about is not. It's not like a black box where water comes in and gold comes out.
Right. It's
You
not
know,
alchemy. It's just advanced thinking about the science.
yes, advanced thinking of where this is going to go. Like I know that someday I'm going to be able to get, glass panels that do exactly what I'm talking about in the
Right.
shape that I want in order to build a geodesic dome that I want. Stepper motors or sensors are well known. And that's the thing, that sort of answers your question in a sense that in predictable arts, like computers, hardware, they're called predictable arts, which means that you can come up with stuff and you can say, yes, this can be built, like a GPS transceiver in a golf ball.
Mm-hmm.
It can be built as soon as they're small enough to be put inside of a golf ball. So, long-winded answer, yes, you can file patents on stuff that won't be hitting the shelves for 10 years. In fact, most what are called pioneering patents, super innovative, they're not valuable to the end of their lifetime.
Mm.
It takes so long for the industry to catch up to the technology.
So, what is the value? I mean, my grandfather's patents for
Yeah.
one is the cardboard shipper, right?
Yeah.
For end caps.
Yeah.
So you put your product in the thing, it arrives at the store, you pull a face off of it, and voila,
Mhm.
your shipping container is your standee to advertise.
Okay.
And then the other patent that he created was using a database to connect barcode scanners
Mhm.
and then reference that barcode and then print out a competitor's coupon if the competitor
Mhm.
pays for that process.
Well, Catalina Marketing made a shit ton of money off of those patents, by the way. Uh,
Yes,
go to any grocery store. I mean, I worked on a lot of Catalina's patents,
right,
and just the stuff you see at the point of sale uh, was covered by their patents because they were doing everything coupon,
right,
any
yes,
to coupon delivery, loyalty cards, etc. So, these are assets for the company, which they can use to license to other companies. So, for example, Giant,
right.
markets, they're, I'm pretty positive that Catalina, licensed their stuff to all the major brands.
Yeah, in San Antonio or in Texas, HEB still have the Catalina machines installed in a lot of the stores. Uh, so I was really impressed to see that. I know he worked with Publix and Hy-Vee and all those purchasing groups
Yeah,
um, at Wegmans.
right,
I'm sure that, I don't know about Giant because back then I'm pretty sure Wegmans wasn't as far south in
right,
Pennsylvania.
right. No, I was just using an example, like
Yeah,
when you're trying to market, like, coupons, it's a huge market. You're talking about supermarkets. I had a client that went into the gas station coupon delivery. They got bought by Catalina. They bought them and all their patents. So
mm,
Catalina was the large gorilla in that space through their IP. And this is, people always ask me what's the value of a patent. I'm like, ask Dell, ask Hughes Aircraft, ask Catalina Mark, ask anybody that's been able, uh, to use IP properly, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about it this way: if Catalina had no IP, okay, they'd have no licensing revenue. They would be competing with everybody and their mother in the supermarkets, versus with an IP portfolio, you can go and you can say, this is our portfolio. We're only
Mm-hmm.
taking non-exclusive licenses. You can go ahead and do this stuff, but we have 1,000 patents, by the way. It might be in your best interest to not copy us and to actually, pay for the
Just pay to
innovation.
use it. Yeah, yeah.
And that's how portfolios are used. Like, I think I've used the example. I think Dell has made more money off of its patent portfolio. I have to double check this, but at one point this was true. They had made more money off of their patent portfolio than all the computers they ever sold.
Mm. Well,
Computers have a small margin. The margin, especially nowadays, with you can get a high-end PC for like $2,500.
right.
And they're all about, whether it's a Dell, they're all competing in that same little niche market. So the margins, I don't think, are very high. And that's where, the IP comes in, right? That
Mm-hmm.
rather than being in cheaper, better, faster land, which, by the way, is a land you never want to be in, you want to
Nope.
be in monopoly land with proprietary technology. And you can ask, there's plenty of examples. Catalina Marketing,
Apple.
Google, Apple, Broadcom is another startup that started with a bunch of college kids, and now they have like 5 gazillion patents covering communication systems and things like that. And of course, they've made more money off of their patent portfolio than anything that they ever made. The chips or whatever they produce
Right.
uh, is in the noise relative to the licensing revenues they get from licensing out their IP.
Now you're doing something interesting. Can we talk about it?
Well, I'm protected open source, so I can talk about anything I do
Okay.
because I file a
So
patent first before I talk about it.
so in open source community, you mentioned something about that it's better for you to be in monopoly land with proprietary technology.
Right.
But let's say you're more interested in the progress of mankind than you are in stopping advancement in a particular industry, because patents can be used to bludgeon a company out of existence because
Yeah, they
you,
can. They
you
can
know,
also
like
they can
you
also shelve. Like patents can be shelved where companies will buy patents not because they want to develop the product,
right.
just because they don't want to come into the market and hurt their existing product base. I'm sorry. Sorry for the
No, no,
interrupt.
that's exactly where I was going. Like, say I had a magic power generation machine that made a lot of other products that have whole industries behind them
Sure.
obsolete. Well, good for me and good for mankind, but someone's going to buy it and bury it because they have an industry they need to maintain. Open source allows me to keep it out of the hands of corporations, and therefore
Not
makes
really.
no.
No, no. I mean, open source, well, it depends on the license. I mean, most
Right.
open source licenses are just a copyright license. They're not even there is no patent, right? It's basically somebody that wants to be attributed. I mean, all the licenses I've read are like, hey, you can use it for whatever, just mention my name, pat me
Right.
on the. So, what we're talking about, and I see where you're going with that, but I think the better approach is to protect it, then to choose who you give it away to, as opposed to not protect it and then just give it away to everybody, including perhaps actors that you don't want it to go to. Now, which you can do once you protect it. If you don't protect it, you don't have the option. So, the model I'm going after is protected open source. Uh, and there's going to be some things that we're just not going to patent. I mean, there's stuff that I'm like, this is a great idea. I'm just going to give it to the world. Okay. So, but the main thing really is, I think a lot of people that I see with open source, it's sort of an afterthought. It's like I'll be going, hey, I noticed you put out OxyKit, good example. I noticed you put this out to the entire world, and you're complaining about never getting paid back and engineers ripping you off and blah 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 blah. I'm like, well, I wish I would have met you before you made that decision, because I probably would have encouraged you to file some protection, and then that way you can still give it away. You can still give it away to whoever you want, but now you can have strings attached. Like, if I give it to this company and they agreed that they're going to pay me, and all of a sudden they're like, sorry dude, it's open source. You have a way of saying, well, it's protected open source, and the free and educational use, no problem, have at it. But now I notice that you're, making gazillions of dollars and you're not even sending me a thank you letter. So that's the reasoning behind why I use it. But what I'm saying is, what I tell people that quote do open source, I don't care what your IP plan is, as long as you have a plan.
Right.
Open source is part, like I teach IP, and I say ideas come into a box. That box could be your brain, or it could be a committee at IBM, but let's say it's your brain. Ideas come in, right? Do they have a high business value? Okay. Wow. Now you should start, high business value, right? You can make money off of it. Or maybe high societal value. You can save the world. It's got some value. The output of that box is one of three decisions: patent, publish, or keep secret. Publish is open source. When you publish it and you don't protect it, by definition, you're open source, because you're giving it to the world.
Right.
As soon as you publish it. But what I'm saying is, you can also protect things and still have your cake and eat it, so to speak.
Right.
By saying, yes, if you're doing it, like, for example, me, you want to build my greenhouse in your backyard? I've got videos, it's not complicated. Start doing it and I'll help you. If you have a question like, hey, how much, whatever, I will help you, because I want you to eat food and I want you to feed your family, right?
Right.
But now if you turn around and say, oh, I'm going to send this to China and have it mass produced, and I'm going to start making a business out of it and start making profit, well, then, I'm going to be like, it's only fair
that you give me a share of that.
Right. I mean, you don't have to, it could be like paid to whatever, but at least you have a mechanism now to go after those activities. Or let's say Evil Corp gets a hold of it, and you don't want Evil Corp to have it.
Right.
You could say Evil Corp, because, patents give you the right to exclude others. So you could go to Evil Corp and say, look, I don't even want your money. You just can't use this technology, period. And by the way, give me all the money you've made to date,
right,
for using it without compensation. And by the way, you can't use it anymore. Develop your own shit. So I'm a big proponent for protected open source, but I'm not against open source. You know what I'm saying? In other words, I just want people to be smart about how they use open source, not just use it as an excuse. Because every time I talk to people that don't have patents, you know what they tell me? Oh, I was trying to open source it. I'm like, bullshit. You only thought about open source because you didn't protect it. If it was part of your thinking pattern, no problem. In other words, you did the analysis. You said, hey, I've got this idea. I want it to get out there. I don't care about money. I don't care who gets it. It just needs to go out there. Publish it. Give it to the world. Send it to all the corporations and say, hey, look at this white paper I generated. Right. You guys can have it. Take it. That approach isn't cut off. It's just one of the decisions that you can make, to have, quote, an IP plan. And I tell companies, I don't care what your plan is, as long as you have one. If your plan is to open source it, give it away, be the R&D arm of China without getting compensated, or R&D arm of Google without getting compensated. I have no problem with that. That's your decision. You're the innovator,
Right.
but I don't want people to just blindly, jump on the open source bandwagon. And by the way, being a patent attorney, believe me, that question comes up every time I give a lecture. It'll usually be a guy from Holland every single time. It'll be a Dutch guy. Yeah, but patents are evil and I don't believe in patenting and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, well, I've helped startups monetize themselves with patents. And I don't believe in bright line rules. Patents can be evil. Copyrights can be evil. People can be evil. But what is it? Don't hate the player, not the game, right?
Right. Well, patent is a way to protect yourself and to protect your ideas. And as I can attest, that's a way that my grandfather was able to pass down wealth.
Yep.
It wasn't just generational wealth he had in his back pocket. He was able to generate wealth because he had an idea, and because the idea had his name attached to it. That meant that the licensing fees flowed into that and then out to into his bank account, essentially.
Well,
So
the IP market in 2018 was like 400 billion.
wow.
That's buying and selling of IP, and that's just the documented transactions. There's a lot of undocumented transactions where companies enter into secret agreements and exchange IP for value. But in the documented portion, it was like 380 billion. So I've been in technology for a while, and to me, and I'm not saying this because I'm a patent attorney, by the way, because it's going to sound kind of self-serving.
Right.
And I'll give you examples to show you that it's not, in other words, to back up what I'm talking about. IP assets are the lowest hanging fruit as far as building assets. And the problem is that tech startups, IP is an afterthought as opposed to being the front. Like if I told every startup that Dell made more money off of its IP than all the computers it's ever sold, Hughes Aircraft, Catalina Marketing, right? You would start to sort of see a pattern, right? That these IP portfolios are interesting and important. And they're what gives you the ability to become a Google or a Microsoft or an Apple. Because without that IP, you're in cheaper, better, faster land.
Right.
It's not where you want to be in a business. Cheaper, better, faster land, pick two, right? That's not the land I want to be in. I want to be in monopoly, protected, technology land where I can choose to who I give it to, and who gets to use it, who doesn't get to use it, who has to pay me, who doesn't have to pay me. For example, third world country, if there's a third world country that wanted to do these to feed the third world country, I might just say, well, this is a use that I condone, even though you guys make money off of it. You don't have to pay me for that, for example.
Sure.
That might be a situation where I would consider that.
Now, if you have
without having the IP, that's the point. Is without that, you're just in cheaper, better, faster land. They can copy you. They can, you can still help them. But,
now, is a patent that's unenforced valuable, or do you have to sue if your patent's in violation or someone else's?
Question. There's something called latches, which is a term of law that if you don't value your rights or express your rights, that you can become basically the law says that if you haven't exercised it long enough, you've given it up. But I want people to use my shit, and I want big corporations to use my stuff because I know lawyers that will sue God for 60% of the take. So yes, Google, if you're listening, Megacorps, if you're listening, please copy every single one of my patents and make millions and millions and millions of dollars off of it. Please, please, please. Because I'm going to develop the portfolio, and you're going to have somebody knocking on your door saying, "Hey, thank you for using this technology. Now it's time to pay."
Got it. Now, what if you can you develop systems that are not hard technology, like software, a combination of different kinds of ideas, but they exist as a not a hard material thing. They exist as ideas for the most part.
Well, first of all, ideas by themselves can't be patented, like algorithms, things that occur naturally in nature, an idea for the sake of an idea. It's all about application. Remember, patent law came from engineers, right?
Right.
Engineers are applied scientists. I mean, I consider myself an applied scientist. So I can understand why there's prohibitions against, for example, patenting something naturally occurring in nature. How fucked up would that be? Pardon my French. If you could just go out and grab a plant and patent it.
Don't they have? Can't you patent DNA? I mean, I thought Big Pharma is patenting various
the
points of DNA.
sequencing, the sequencing. It's all about synthesis. There has to be some sort of transformation, but naturally occurring things are not patentable. Laws of nature are not patentable. Theories are not patentable on their own. Software that does nothing but moves numbers around for no other reason is not patentable, even if it's moving numbers in a very cool way.
Right.
You need an application, and this is when I teach patent law. It's really very simple. It's a novel solution to a problem. If there's no problem, there's no invention.
Right.
You have to be
Well,
solving.
what is it they say? Necessity is the mother of all invention.
Mhm.
So you have to have a need to solve the problem, right?
Yeah, and it gets to like how to start a startup. People, I want to brainstorm on starting a startup. I'm like, that's not the way you do it, by the way. Find a problem that you're very interested in, hopefully a problem you have expertise in, and solve it in a way that nobody else has done it, and be passionate about it. Because if you solve a problem that you're passionate about, there's a high probability there's another human on earth that's going to appreciate that solution. And now you've got a market, right?
Right.
My greenhouse, for example, I love going in there. I love growing fish. I love growing plants. I love growing mushrooms. I love going in there and seeing the mushrooms growing, the fish swimming. I can sit there for hours, just literally just watching the fish, watching the plants, fucking around, watering stuff. It's therapeutic. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
After I built it, I said, I know there's at least one other human on earth that wants to have what I'm feeling right now. And I know gardening is huge, and now with food security, there's many humans on earth that are thinking about this, not so much from the zen of, hanging out in your own greenhouse, more so from like, what do we do if there's no food?
Right.
It sure would be nice to have a way of growing food on your own property. And of course, energy, that's why why having these things run off of solar panels and wind turbines could be important, down the road.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's talk about the fish mushroom system that you have going on there. Are you able, like, is the benefit that you get to eat the fish and you get the mushrooms and then whatever the water plants that you're doing, all of those things are at different points edible. And I guess as long as you're careful about how much you consume, are renewable.
Yeah, and this was the thinking. Okay, I took well, I got in aquaponics, which led me to permaculture.
Right.
And and I always say, I wish I would have started with permaculture first because I would have designed my system completely different. But you're at this point in time because of every mistake you've ever made and every right quote right
Right.
decision you've ever made. That's why we're talking to each other. So hindsight is always 2020, right? But when my intention of building the system was actually later on after I took permaculture was recognizing the beauty of diversity. See, most people and this is the question I get all the time, like, how much mushrooms can you produce? How much fish can you produce? How much plants can you
Mhm.
produce? And this is what I tell people. If you want to grow mushrooms, build the biggest mushroom house on earth and grow mushrooms. If you want to maximize your ROI on mushrooms. If you want to maximize your ROI on vegetables, build the biggest greenhouse on earth and grow lettuce and maximize your ROI on lettuce. If you want to grow fish, you're getting the theme, right? Build the
Right.
biggest fish pond and do aquaculture and maximize the biomass you generate per every 10 gallons of water. And there's plenty of people doing that.
Right.
I call it big thinking, which is, by the way, what's killing our planet.
Right.
This big thinking. And, after taking the permaculture course, I appreciated my system more so than before I took the permaculture course, because the biggest thing about permaculture is diversity. Diversity is the spice of life.
Right.
The reason we use fertilizers is because we're doing till farming. We're growing 10,000 acres of corn. And now you've got pests that are specific to corn that now are like, this is a 10,000
Buffet.
acres of
Yeah.
corn. We're going to fricking chow out. So
Right.
what do we do with stupid humans? Oh, let's build GMO corn that is resistant to fertilizers, right? So that now we can spray the shit out of the corn. Yes, the bugs are gone now, but now we're dumping all that fertilizer into our water table.
Right.
The corn, by the way, is killing the soil biome. And now we have to do crop rotation and shit like that because we weren't smart enough to realize that diversity is the key.
Right.
There's companion planting. There's, once I started mixing the different plants in my greenhouse, all of a sudden my pest problems went away. For example, I have a mint bed that's my biofilter, and that's where I throw all my sacrificial plants. In fact, I've got another grow bed that's become sacrificial because I really don't care if the aphids eat the shit out of that, as long as they don't eat what's in the other container, right? So they kind of focus on what they can eat, and they don't come over to what they can't eat because they're fed. And now I'm sort of able to keep everybody happy, including the aphids. And of course, the aphids attract the ladybugs, and the ladybugs attract the praying mantis. It's all connected, it's all
Right.
interrelated. So
What you're doing is encouraging your own micro ecoculture so that each thing is performing its purpose in the circle.
yes, but also I wanted not to only be able to eat lettuce,
Right.
right? In other words, man can't live by lettuce alone, right?
No.
And yes, I can grow a shit ton of lettuce, but how much lettuce can you eat?
Right.
Now I mix and match. I've been doing microgreens lately, which is the super mix of microgreens. Like a pack of seeds is like $5 on Amazon.
Uh-huh.
It grows like all the microgreens I can freaking ever eat. I have to give them away because they just grow so fast that I just don't have the stomach power to eat them all.
Right.
The mushrooms I grow I'm using oyster mushrooms, which are gourmet mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
But I've grown other varieties are also growable, but it's a temperature thing, temperature and humidity and time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But the greenhouse is designed with the evaporative cooler to sort of allow mushroom production throughout the year. And we haven't talked a lot about the technology of the greenhouse, but it does have an evaporative cooling component that takes the hot air from the O2 side of the greenhouse, cools it, moisturizes it, and sends it into the CO2 part of the greenhouse, the mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And it pushes all that CO2 back into the plants. It creates a CO2 O2 loop, a hot air, cold air loop. And it also allows you to grow. My goal was to try to create a structure that could feed one human all year round what they need to live. And as I said, man can't live by lettuce alone.
Right.
So I believe with the mushrooms and the fish, and it would be an interesting experiment. I've often thought about like seeing, doing a YouTube video, right? Like for a few months where I literally live out of my greenhouse for like 2 months.
Right.
And all I can eat is the food that I generate from the greenhouse. That's it. Almost like that burger thing, where the guy ate nothing but hamburgers for.
Yeah. Supersize me.
Yeah, I want to do a super greenhouse me to see if I could live, to see if I could live in a 10 by 20 greenhouse and live off of what I grow,
Right.
which would be microgreens. The catfish, the fish are a little bit of a cycle because they take a little bit of time to grow.
Right.
But right now I've got some pan-sized catfish. Of course, I would have to cook them. Everything would have to be done, like no energy, like a rocket stove to cook them. Unfortunately, the greenhouse would be connected to the grid. That would be, I would like to do a completely off-grid version, but this version would be like version 1.0 where I am on the grid, but I'm doing everything I can to only use the electricity just for the air pumps,
Right.
that are running the system. But I have a rocket stove. I'm a geek. I built rocket stoves, and you can cook on a rocket stove. You can make biochar on a rocket stove. You can make syngas, for rockets. I haven't built a gasifier yet, but that would be before I do this. I would build a gasifier. So now I have a way of cooking with gas, within the greenhouse. I have a way of creating biochar with the rocket stove. And now I've got fish plants and mushrooms to eat. And I also have grubs that if I really, really got hungry, I guess I could eat some worms and some black soldier fly larvae.
Oh,
Which,
geez.
survival, right? I mean, if you're surviving, I'm going to eat worms. I'm going to eat anything that has protein in it and doesn't kill me.
Yeah, I could see eating mealworms. They're kind of fat, and I could think of ways to pretend that they're yummy.
Garlic and
But
butter, brother. Have you ever
yeah,
had escargot?
I have. Yeah,
Okay,
garlic and
that's
butter.
psychological. Like psychologically eating snails, like the ones you see and they look just like the ones in my backyard.
Right.
From a psychological point of view, is pretty freaking gross psychologically.
Same thing with
But
oysters.
I love oysters. There's
Yeah.
another livers. There's a few sort of hated foods like liver, and also pets. We don't eat pets because
Right.
like eating your dog or your cat, which is a perfectly good source of protein. I mean, a
And
human, we're not going to go there, but I mean, push comes to shove.
people survive the Donner Party, and that's
Yep.
because they ate their friends.
That's right. That's
But
right.
yeah, I don't
Not
recommend
unless
that.
you have to, right? I mean, that's extreme survival. Like,
Yeah, I think I would rather just walk out into the snow and hang it up if it's a choice between eating my friends or my pet. I don't think I can go there. That's
have
just
you
not a
watched the movie about the soccer players?
no.
There's a movie about a soccer team that crashed in the Andes, and they were like in that situation, and they actually ended up. They had rules that they made. You couldn't eat anybody that you knew,
Right?
so no relatives or friends or anything like that. But they literally had no choice. I mean, there was no food. They're in tundra conditions. They don't know when they're going to be rescued. And in fact, had they not cannibalized, and we're going kind of a dark road right now,
Yeah.
probably,
Yeah.
had they not done what they did, they wouldn't have survived. And they're not proud of it, obviously, because they've written books and movies about these guys, and I'm sure when they walk into a room, they're like, "Oh, you're the cannibal, aren't you?" Like, fuck. What a
Ye-
reputation to have, right?
Yeah, I wonder if they enjoy watching Hannibal Lecter. Oh yeah, a nice Chianti would have gone well with that, but no.
Yeah. Well, interesting. If the movie is correct, they didn't have any stoves or anything,
So
so they
they
were
had to eat it
putting
raw.
meat on the aluminum part of the frame of the plane
Oh god.
and kind of making jerky, I guess, out of it.
Yeah.
We did jerky,
I'm
but
gonna
let's
go ahead
change the
and
topic. We've gone
I'm
down a
just
dark part.
yeah, I don't have any interest in that.
Yeah.
I plan on if there's that much of a survival situation, I've got enough body fat that I think I'll survive.
That's always there's a reason to keep some body fat. Actually,
Yeah, if you're
that's
super lean, it's going to be tough on you when the food dries up. At least
or in the water. In the water, super lean guys freeze their ass off.
that's
You
true.
know, there's a story of a ship that went down in like the North Sea or something crazy like that. Everybody died except one dude that swam for 6 hours. He's from Norway and survived. And the interesting about the article said he was very much shaped like a seal. Not a Navy SEAL, but he had lots of girth,
Right.
and that's what kept him from freezing to death and allowed him to make that 6 hour swim in free. It's like a world record supposedly that no human has survived that long in that cold of an environment. But this guy from Norway apparently has the
Was
record.
his name Winhoff?
No, I know Wim Hof. I'm very much into extremes.
Uh-huh.
So I do the polar plunging and the breath holding and uh, I'm ex-military and we got drowned quite a bit, and I like pushing sort of the envelope of the human brain and what the body and the mind can sort of tolerate. And cold is a very interesting phenomena to me. That cold is a great torture. Cold is used as torture.
They use it in SEER school up in Maine. Strip
Yes.
you, they spray you with cold water in your underwear and leave you out in the winter of Maine as a way to soften your mind. Because
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
would have gone to SEER school if I would have stayed in my path, but unfortunately, I didn't get to go and experience that. But
I'm sure you didn't miss anything.
I
You
heard it's. I actually would look. I mean, it sounds crazy, but you know, I'm kind of crazy. You have to be kind of crazy to like want to volunteer to go get in harm's way and jump out of planes and
right.
you know do scuba and blow shit up underwater. It's
You,
there's a
you,
reason only 10% of the population make it through,
right.
because most people just don't have the mindset, to push through things like that, like SEER school. They lock you in a box indefinitely, in this little box where you can't move.
They
And
actually will practice in one of the SEER schools. They actually practice waterboarding
yep,
as a technique.
I've been
Um,
waterboarded.
oh, you have? Did you enjoy it? Was it like a spa treatment?
Well, it's never enjoyable, but it's always good to have a plan.
Right.
And it was interesting because uh, later on in life, I went through the Man of War Society, which has, and I probably shouldn't go into a lot of detail, but anyways, uh, I've been waterboarded, but I had a plan, and in fact, I knew they were going to do it. It's like when I saw the videos, I'm like, I knew everything they were going to do just because from my military background, I was just like,
Right.
okay, that's SEALs, that's from Special Forces. I could see just by watching the videos, I could see where they got
Their
their
source material.
yeah,
I
and
mean,
and
when
and
when I first saw Tough Mudder,
yeah,
uh, I go, why the hell are people paying to go do this shit? It was miserable in boot camp when I had to go do all that crap. but you know, I did go do a Spartan race. And a Tough Mudder. I still am not a fan of the electric shock thing. That was pretty miserable.
Oh, I
Um,
didn't know that. Where it makes you hold things so you let go.
no, they have wires that dangle and they've got a charge on them, and some of them are dummy wires and some of them are
Ah,
live. And so
and you're
you
like
walk
monkey
through it and
bars.
you go, you know. I mean, I got shocked worse servicing military aircraft.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I'm interested
still
now.
not
See, this is the
enjoyable.
kind of stuff that gets me excited. Like, I don't know why. I know why. I mean, my background. I washed out of Special Forces scuba school, so ever since then, I'd be like, what if, what if I'd gone through SEER? What if I would have been in all the war? Like, but it's a stupid. I quit going down that path because, after studying Stoicism, it makes
Hmm.
it very simple. Worry about the shit you can control,
Right.
which is pretty much not the future and not the past. It's like this moment, right? This is
Yeah, the where as far as my arms can reach, that's what I can control.
bingo.
Yeah.
And it makes life simple, right? Because you're like, okay, this is all I can grab a beer, I've got a can opener, I've got good conversation,
Right.
you know, I can control this, right? But thinking about what if I had been this, or what if, or what am I going to do tomorrow, or what if I can't pay the mortgage, all that
Right.
mental masturbation, as I call it, I've just dropped it, and it's been through meditation. And, meditation has been extremely helpful
Yes.
just to shut my brain off when it starts getting, the monkey brain is like, oh, you got to pay your, you're gonna, that's the way our brain, we're trained that way for survival. I mean,
Right.
obviously, if we didn't give a shit, we'd be dead right now, right? So I
It,
understand why we have that fear, but being able to shut that off at will is a superpower.
right.
And when I get myself into these little, rabbit holes of what if, what if, what if, I'm just like, fuck that. I'm right here. I could die tonight, and then I'm
Yeah.
worried about
I
shit that can, like,
yeah, I have the what if game. If I start going down the negative loop of a what if game, what I do is I start trying to go, okay, well, what if things start working out? What if this actually is what's going to happen? What if, you know what I mean? So you
change
can
of
talk
contact.
your, yeah, you can talk yourself down and you can talk yourself up.
Bingo.
So it's about always recognizing the balance of what's available to you. Because if you're going to make up a story, you might as well make up a story where you end happy.
There you go. There you go. The power of positive thinking, right? And
Hmm.
in other words, it's easy to go down the negative path because our monkey brain is designed that way.
Right.
To think what's the word, like I'm gonna die, like I can't pay my mortgage. Oh, we're wired to worry about that kind of shit. But by the way, that's the kind of shit that actually also kills you. I mean, all that's, yes, you need the monkey brain for survival. You want to be tactically aware. You don't want to walk around in a daze with your phone like this. And, you know, I when I walk around, I'm in the moment, I'm looking everywhere, situational awareness, just because shit can happen, right?
Hmm.
When you expect it. And like I'll be in Georgetown and I'll be walking down the street, it's late, and it's after hours, so all the bars have let out, and there's a lot of drunk college kids out,
Right.
right? And I'm a fighter. I can fucking fight. I've fought a lot in my life. But what's the best fight? The one you avoid, right?
Right.
So
Yeah. The best
seeing a group
military tactic is to turn around and go the other way.
what I do is I'll just cross the street, and I don't care if they think I'm a pussy or whatever. I don't give a shit. It's just easier for me, especially if they're roughhousing with each other. It's just like being aware. Like, yes, I can be in that situation, and yes, I can get in a fight with these guys, and yes, I'll probably get my ass kicked, and maybe I'll kick one of their ass, whatever. But I'm 65. I have to choose my battles, and in those situations I will just walk across the street. Now if they come after me and back me up into a point where then it's game on, right?
Right.
But, why should I intentionally get myself into that situation that potentially could end up in a fight when I can simply just walk across the street and just avoid it altogether? And fine if they think I'm scared or whatever, that's their problem, not mine.
Yeah, there's no reason to engage if there's no reason to engage, right?
Yeah.
And the best military tactic is one where it's completely asymmetrical and your opponent's unaware, right? Which is a dirty, dishonest way of being. There's no honor in that, except for the only honor is coming home. I mean,
That's right. And I've studied some Krav Maga and some of the other sort of skills in that respect. And it's exactly what you say. You want to present an easy, non-threatening target.
mhm,
Okay, so let's say, for example, that I couldn't cross the street. Let's say I'm in an alley. There's no way for me to escape. Maybe, and let's say I can't go the other direction. The door was locked behind me, right?
mhm,
So now I have to confront this potential dangerous situation, right?
mhm.
And people that are looking for victims are looking for victims. They're called predators, right?
Right,
And they look for weakness. That's what they look for. So you want to present weakness, believe it or not. You don't want to present strength. Like if you start blading and getting in your jujitsu stance or karate stance, you're tipping them off that you're not an easy target, right?
right. You're gonna trigger their on guard.
A gun, a knife,
Right.
they may escalate it. Whereas if you go, look, guys, I don't want any trouble. I just want to get out of here. Here's my wallet. If depending on the situation, money's replaceable.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Lives are not. Hey, here's my wallet. Have at it, guys. Here's my pin. Go get some money. Have fun. Okay. Avoided the situation. But let's talk about a situation where they're just gonna fuck you up no matter what, right?
Right.
Like they're gonna fucking kill you potentially. At that point, you still want to present this sort of target that's an easy target because you're trying to catch them off guard. And at least
Yeah.
from what I've learned from those sort of techniques is that the reason you're like this, not blading, is because you're trying to figure out who's the first target and is he right or left-handed.
Right.
So in that moment, you're just situationally aware. You're trying, look, I don't want any trouble, but you're observing and you're seeing who the leader is. You're trying to assess, who's the first person that's going to attack. All sorts of stuff like that. Is he right-handed or left-handed? And now, when you're like this, they think you're an easy target. So probably the bully or whatever, the head dude, is going to come in and is going to try to do some violent action on you. But as soon as they break your space, you attack like a motherfucker.
Right.
You want to see which side they're throwing from. Like, you want to know whether right-handed or left-handed. Doesn't matter whether it's a weapon or not. You still treat it the same way. You want to isolate the arm, block the arm, and strike as fast as you can, because that causes, when you hit somebody, it causes about a 0.25 second shock to their brain,
Right.
where you're like, what the fuck happened? And they're just like,
Well,
and then
it gives you a reset. You have to reevaluate the situation.
yeah, and you follow up with like brutal fucking, like knee to the groin, punch to the face, throat,
Right.
slam, throw them on the fucking ground, stomp them, and get the fuck out of there if you can, or get ready for the next threat. And from basic martial arts, you always want to line them up. You never want to be like in the center. You want to make sure that you're fighting one dude at a time. So all this stuff you got to take in consideration. But violence of action, is where you want to be at that point.
Right.
And you don't wait till they're in your space. Like, as soon as they're coming into your space, that's it. they're violating you, and that's when you got to fucking kind of go.
Right. Yeah. That's I've done I didn't do well when I was young to stay out of those situations. And unfortunately, I often chose larger groups of people to be a smartass to. But that was a blessing in disguise because it taught me a lot about myself and when to keep my mouth shut. So there you go.
Down lots of rabbit holes, so you take control, because
Well, I've had a full day. I got up at 5, and I was doing some photography at a rodeo before I got home
oh,
to
nice.
pop on this. So, uh, why don't we just end it here and make a
Sure.
promise to come back later? Because I'm hoping that we'll get to work on some things together. I've got some ideas. Um, you've got some things going on, and there's plenty more to talk about, and hopefully there's another tomorrow for us to do this. So thank you so much for coming, for spending time with me, for explaining about patent law, about eating soccer team members, and black fly grubs.
Yeah,
We covered quite a wide range of survivalist techniques
yeah.
and how to live in a civilized world, and
Mhm.
fend off corporations. So I think we've covered the gambit today.
Yeah, we have actually, and thank you for your time. I appreciate you very much. So,
Where can they find you online?
well, I'm easy to find. If you search Carlos R. Villamar, um, I like using my middle initial on everything, to distinguish myself from the other Carlos Villamars that do exist.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a YouTube channel for it's called OU812 Aquaponics. Like the Van Halen album, as many of your viewers will say, "Hey, isn't that a Van Halen album?" Yes, it is a Van Halen album. I just happen to like cryptography. OU812. OU also 81.
Yeah.
They were talking about sexual things,
Right.
but I've got OU812 aquaponics, which works very nicely because OU812 of our fish, our plants, or our mushrooms. So I have a Facebook group called OU812 aquaponics.
Uh-huh.
And I have a YouTube channel called OU812 aquaponics. And that's where I post my videos of the greenhouse. I just did a video today that I haven't uploaded. I basically go in my greenhouse and just, hey, here's the fish, here's the plants.
Right.
This is what I'm doing. I'm not an influencer, so I think I've got I don't know, 700 subscribers or something like that.
You've got 699 more than I have right now. So but we'll see where things go. You are on the ground floor, sir, of the next big thing, as I keep telling myself.
Mhm.
But again, thank you so much for being on here. If you need patent advice, I say reach out to this gentleman. And thank you very much for watching Gnosis.
Thank you so much. You have a great night.
Thank you too.